Number 15. The disappearance of Tammy Leppert. Born on February 5, 1965, in Rockledge, Florida, Tammy was a well-known beauty queen, model, and actress. Her stunning looks and captivating presence helped her make a name for herself in beauty pageants and small film roles, including appearances in movies like Scarface. However, beneath her glamorous exterior, there was a complex and troubled reality that would culminate in her mysterious disappearance in July 1983. Tammy's early life was filled with the kind of success that many young women dream of. She participated in over 300 beauty contests by the time she was a teenager, winning several of them. Her mother, Linda Curtis, was a talent agent and heavily involved in her daughter's career. As Tammy transitioned from pageants into acting, it seemed as though she had a promising future ahead of her. However, things began to take a dark turn in the months leading up to her disappearance. In the spring of 1983, Tammy began exhibiting strange and seemingly paranoid behavior. According to her mother and friends, Tammy expressed fear that someone was trying to harm her. She would reportedly say that people were out to get her, but refused to provide any further details. This paranoia escalated after Tammy filmed what turned out to be her final movie role in Scarface. According to Linda, after returning home from filming, Tammy became extremely frightened and refused to leave her house. She even requested that all the windows in her bedroom be covered. During one disturbing incident, she reportedly locked herself in a room for an entire day, terrified that someone was after her. Tammy's behavior became so erratic that her mother decided to have her undergo a mental health evaluation. A doctor examined her, but found no evidence of drug use or psychological conditions that would explain her paranoia. In spite of this, Tammy's fears persisted, and she became increasingly distant from her family and friends. On July 6, 1983, Tammy left her home with a friend named Keith Roberts to attend a party in Cocoa Beach, Florida. According to Roberts, they got into an argument while driving, and Tammy asked to be let out of the car. He claimed to have dropped her off at a parking lot near State Road A1A and never saw her again. Tammy was only 18 years old at the time, and her sudden disappearance stunned her family. After Tammy was reported missing, an extensive search was launched, but no significant leads were found. Investigators initially suspected foul play due to her recent behavior and the mysterious circumstances of her disappearance. Over the years, several theories emerged, but none have provided definitive answers. One of the most widely discussed theories is that Tammy fell victim to a serial killer. The early 1980s saw a number of notorious killers, including Christopher Wilder and John Crutchley, operating in Florida. Wilder, also known as the Beauty Queen Killer, was a wealthy photographer who lured young women with promises of modeling work before abducting and murdering them. Crutchley, dubbed the Vampire Rapist, was convicted of a series of heinous crimes in the same area where Tammy disappeared. Given Tammy's striking appearance and her background in modeling and beauty pageants, some believe she may have crossed paths with one of these predators. However, no evidence has definitively linked either killer to her case. Another theory revolves around Tammy's alleged knowledge of criminal activity. According to some reports, Tammy may have witnessed a drug deal or other illegal activity while working on the set of Scarface. It's been speculated that her erratic behavior and paranoia stemmed from fear of retaliation from those involved in the crime. Tammy reportedly confided in a friend that she had seen something she shouldn't have, which left her fearing for her life. However, this theory has never been corroborated, and there are no solid leads to support it. Tammy's mother, Linda Curtis, firmly believes that her daughter was murdered and has criticized the initial investigation for not taking her fears seriously enough. She has publicly expressed her belief that Tammy's disappearance was the result of foul play, but the specifics of what happened remain elusive. In interviews over the years, Linda has stated that she believes Tammy's involvement in the film industry may have led her to interactions with dangerous people. Other theories suggest that Tammy may have run away voluntarily. Given her troubled mental state in the months leading up to her disappearance, some speculate that she may have wanted to escape her life and start over somewhere new. However, this theory seems less likely given her close relationship with her family and the fact that she left behind all her personal belongings, including her money and identification. Additionally, there has been no credible evidence to suggest that Tammy is alive and living under a new identity. In the years since Tammy's disappearance, there have been multiple alleged sightings of her, but none have been confirmed. One particularly compelling lead came from a woman in Texas who bore a striking resemblance to Tammy. This individual was living under an assumed name and claimed to have memory loss. However, after further investigation, it was determined that she was not Tammy. As with many cold cases, advances in technology have reignited interest in Tammy's disappearance. In 2024, the case was re-examined using modern forensic methods. Investigators are hopeful that new DNA testing techniques could provide clues, particularly if any evidence surfaces that could be linked to known serial killers or other criminals from that area. However, as of now, no breakthroughs have been reported. Tammy's case has been featured on various true crime shows, including Unsolved Mysteries, keeping her story alive in the public's consciousness. With no body and no solid evidence pointing to her whereabouts, the question of what happened to the young beauty queen from Cocoa Beach endures, leaving those who knew and loved her grappling with the uncertainty of her fate. Number 14. The Glico-Morinaga Case. The Glico-Morinaga Case, also known as the Monster with 21 Faces case, is one of Japan's most perplexing and notorious unsolved crimes, involving kidnapping, extortion, and a relentless series of threats that terrorized the country's confectionery industry in the 1980s. It all began on March 18, 1984, when Katsuhisa Ozaki, president of the famous candy company Glico, was kidnapped from his home by armed men who broke into his residence, tied up his mother, and held his family hostage. The kidnappers demanded 1 billion yen in ransom and 100 kilograms of gold bars in exchange for Izaki's release. However, in a daring twist of events, Izaki managed to escape from his captors 3 days later, unharmed. While this might have signaled the end of the terrifying ordeal for Izaki and the Glico company as a whole, it was merely the beginning of a far more elaborate and sinister plot that would stretch on for over a year. Soon after Izaki's escape, a series of mysterious letters began arriving at Glico headquarters and various media outlets. The letters were signed by a group or individual calling themselves the Monster with 21 Faces, a name they took from the villain of a popular Japanese detective series. In these letters, the monster taunted both Glico and the police, mocking their failure to capture the kidnappers and threatening to poison Glico's products. One of the letters read, "To the police fools, are you stupid? There's so many of you. What on earth are you doing?" The Monster with 21 Faces made it clear that they were not finished with Glico, and soon enough, they took their threats a step further. On May 10, 1984, the criminals sent another chilling letter, claiming they had laced Glico's candies with potassium cyanide. Panic spread quickly, and Glico was forced to pull its products from store shelves, causing significant financial losses and damaging the company's reputation. Police were deployed to search stores across Japan, but no poison products were ever found, leading some to believe the threat was a bluff designed to create chaos. Nonetheless, the fear was palpable, and the monster with 21 faces had successfully created mass hysteria, leveraging their threats to toy with both the company and the authorities. As the months dragged on, the monster expanded their threats to other companies, including another major confectionery manufacturer, Morinaga. Just as with Glico, the group claimed to have poisoned Morinaga's candies and demanded ransom in exchange for halting their campaign. The Japanese public became increasingly terrified, with supermarket shelves being emptied and food companies forced to invest heavily in security measures. The monster appeared to relish their power over the companies, taunting them with more letters while constantly shifting their demands and threats. The police launched an extensive investigation, but the monster with 21 faces proved to be elusive. Despite multiple surveillance efforts, ambushes, and public pleas, the authorities consistently came up short. The criminals displayed an uncanny ability to evade capture, and despite the enormity of the case, no solid leads emerged. One of the closest brushes with the group came when the police spotted a man they dubbed the Fox-Eyed Man near a ransom drop site. Although this individual became a key person of interest, he vanished before he could be apprehended, leaving investigators with nothing but a vague description and endless speculation. As the monster's reign of terror continued, the pressure on law enforcement grew to unbearable levels. The case, which had drawn intense media coverage and public scrutiny, became a symbol of police ineptitude, and the failure to catch the criminals weighed heavily on the Japanese authorities. One of the most devastating moments came in August 1985, when the head of the police investigation, Superintendent Yamamoto, took his own life by self-immolation, a final act of despair and shame over his inability to bring the perpetrators to justice. The monster, coldly acknowledging Yamamoto's death, sent a final letter stating that they would no longer target food companies. Their eerie sign-off read, "We forgive the police fools." Despite the monster's declaration that they were ceasing their activities, the case remains unsolved to this day, and no arrests have ever been made. Theories abound about the identities and motives of the group. Some believe that the criminals were disgruntled former employees of the targeted companies, seeking revenge for perceived slights. Others speculate that the monster with 21 faces may have been connected to organized crime, given the group's sophisticated evasion tactics and knowledge of police operations. A particularly compelling theory is that the monster was a group of professional extortionists who had prior experience in Japan's criminal underworld. Their meticulous planning and ability to remain one step ahead of the authorities suggest a high level of organization, and their use of public taunts and media manipulation aligns with the tactics employed by crime syndicates seeking to assert dominance. However, no concrete evidence has emerged to support this theory, and the true nature of the monster remains unrevealed. Another theory is that the crimes were part of a larger political agenda, possibly orchestrated by a group with ties to extremist factions. Japan in the 1980s was a nation grappling with political and social upheaval, and some speculate that the monster's actions were intended to undermine public trust in corporations and law enforcement. The fact that the criminals never followed through on their threats to actually poison products, despite causing widespread fear, lends credence to the idea that their primary goal was to sow discord rather than to actually commit acts of violence. In the end, the Glico Morinaga case remains one of Japan's greatest unsolved mysteries. The monster with 21 faces vanished just as mysteriously as they had appeared, leaving behind no trace of their true identities or motives. The case continues to haunt Japanese law enforcement, serving as a reminder of their inability to crack the mystery of the faceless criminals who once terrorized an entire nation. Number 13. The disappearance of Emanuela Orlandi. Emanuela Orlandi, the daughter of a Vatican City employee, lived within the small, independent city-state. As a typical teenager, she enjoyed music, fashion, and spending time with her friends. On the day of her disappearance, she was headed to a flute lesson at the music school she regularly attended. She made a phone call to her sister around 5 p.m., saying she had been approached by a man offering her a job to promote Avon Cosmetics. This detail seemed harmless at the time, but would later become central to the public's understanding of what happened next. After the lesson, Emanuela was seen getting into a large, dark car. This would be the last sighting of her. From that moment, she vanished without a trace, triggering an investigation that would span decades. The Orlandi family, devastated and desperate for answers, sought the help of Italian police and Vatican authorities, but early efforts to locate her were unsuccessful. Initial theories suggested she may have been abducted, but as time went on, the case took a darker and more complex turn. One of the first and most persistent theories surrounding Emanuela's disappearance involved the Vatican itself. Some believed that individuals within the Vatican had knowledge of her fate or were complicit in a cover-up. The mystery deepened when just a few weeks after Emanuela's disappearance, anonymous calls began arriving, claiming that the teenager had been kidnapped as leverage to secure the release of Mehmet Ali Aja, the Turkish man who had attempted to assassinate Pope John Paul II in 1981. The kidnappers, who identified themselves as members of the Grey Wolves, an extremist Turkish group, demanded Aja's release in exchange for Emanuela's safe return. The Vatican remained silent in the face of these demands, and despite multiple anonymous calls, no concrete evidence ever emerged to substantiate the group's involvement with Emanuela's disappearance. However, the idea that Emanuela was caught in a broader geopolitical web stuck in the public's mind, especially given the tumultuous backdrop of the Cold War and the complex dynamics between the Vatican and the Soviet Union. Aja himself later claimed to have no knowledge of Emanuela's whereabouts, only furthering the confusion. Another prominent theory involved organized crime, particularly the Banda della Magliana, a notorious Roman criminal gang that was said to have deep ties to the Vatican Bank. According to this theory, Emanuela's kidnapping was orchestrated to pressure the Vatican to repay a massive debt owed to the mafia. In 2012, claims surfaced that the mob had taken her in retaliation for financial discrepancies within the Vatican Bank, and that her body had been buried in the crypt of a basilica in Rome. Investigations into these claims, including the exhumation of the tomb in question, yielded no conclusive evidence, leaving this theory as speculative as the others. In 2018, new hope emerged when the family received an anonymous letter suggesting that Emanuela's remains could be found in the Vatican Teutonic Cemetery, a small, secluded burial ground within the Vatican walls. This led to a search of 2 tombs, but once again, no trace of the missing teenager was found. Adding to the intrigue, both tombs were unexpectedly empty, despite records indicating that they should have contained the remains of 2 19th century princesses. The discovery of the empty tombs only fueled public fascination with the mystery, as well as suspicions of a cover-up involving the Vatican. Over the years, the Orlandi family has been tireless in their pursuit of answers, appealing to the Vatican and Italian authorities alike to reopen the case and provide any information that might lead to the resolution of Emanuela's disappearance. Emanuela's brother, Pietro Orlandi, has been particularly vocal, leading protests and media campaigns to keep the investigation alive and in the public eye. Despite his efforts, the Vatican has often remained distant and seemingly reluctant to engage with the case, offering little beyond vague reassurances that they have no further information to provide. However, in a surprising turn of events, in 2023, the Vatican announced that it was reopening the investigation into Emanuela's disappearance, citing new leads that had come to light. The move came after persistent public pressure, including a popular Netflix documentary, Vatican Girl, which renewed global interest in the case. While details of the new leads remain unclear, the announcement has rekindled hope that after 4 decades, Emanuela's family might finally get some answers. Among the various theories that have persisted over the years, some suggest that Emanuela was the victim within the Vatican or its surrounding communities. These claims, while unproven, have prompted further speculation about whether individuals in positions of power may have been involved in her disappearance, and whether efforts were made to shield them from scrutiny. This theory aligns with broader concerns about institutional abuse within religious organizations and the potential for cover-ups to protect those implicated. Others have speculated that Emanuela may have run away voluntarily, either with someone she knew or to escape her life in the Vatican. This theory is less widely accepted, given her close relationship with her family and the lack of any evidence suggesting she was unhappy or planning to leave. Still, it cannot be entirely ruled out, as the absence of a body or any definitive proof of foul play leaves room for various possibilities. Today, Emanuela's disappearance continues to haunt Italy, the Vatican, and the global community, standing as a reminder how even in an age of surveillance and advanced forensic techniques, some mysteries remain unsolved. The case has become a symbol of enduring grief for the Orlandi family and a source of frustration for those seeking transparency from the Vatican. Whether the new investigation will yield the long-sought answers or simply add another layer to the intrigue surrounding Emanuela's fate remains to be seen. Number 12. Nina Cragmile's Bloodstained Crypt. Nina Cragmiles was born in 1864 into a prominent and wealthy family. She was the granddaughter of Pleasant Cragmiles, who had been an influential figure in the town of Cleveland. Her father, John Henderson Cragmiles, was also well known, not only for his success in business, but for his devotion to his only daughter, Nina. Tragically, her life was cut short in 1871 when she was only 7 years old. The story goes that on a fateful October day, Nina was riding with her grandfather in a horse-drawn buggy when, in a terrible accident, the buggy was struck by a train. Nina was killed instantly, and her untimely death devastated her family, particularly her father, who vowed to construct a grand mausoleum to honor her memory. The Cragmiles family spared no expense in building the mausoleum. Located in the cemetery at St. Luke's Episcopal Church, the structure was crafted from pristine white Italian marble and stood as a testament to the family's love for their lost daughter. Inside, Nina's body was placed in a small marble coffin, with room for other family members who would eventually join her in death. The mausoleum was an impressive sight, but it wouldn't take long for strange phenomena to begin manifesting. Shortly after the mausoleum was completed, blood-red stains began to appear on the marble exterior. The more the family tried to clean or scrub the stains away, the more persistent they became, eventually spreading across the crypt's surface. Over time, the stains became a permanent feature, leading to widespread rumors and speculation about their origin. The locals were quick to connect the markings to the tragic death of young Nina, and thus the legend of the blood-stained crypt was born. To many, the mysterious red stains were viewed as a supernatural manifestation of Nina's restless spirit. Some believed that the stains were symbolic of her tragic death, marking the crypt as a constant reminder of the loss that the Cragmiles family had suffered. Others claimed that the crypt was cursed and that the stains would only continue to spread as long as the family remained buried there. The inexplicable nature of the stains lent credence to these paranormal theories, and the story of Nina's mausoleum quickly became a staple of local lore. As years passed, other members of the Cragmiles family were interred in the mausoleum, including Nina's father, John, who died in 1899. With each new burial, the rumors about the mausoleum's curse grew, as did the bloodstains on the marble. Visitors to the site often claimed to feel a chilling presence or sense an otherworldly atmosphere surrounding the crypt. The story of Nina's blood-stained mausoleum became a tale passed down through generations, with the mystery of the red marks never truly explained. Over the years, various theories have been proposed to explain the mysterious stains. Some believe that the blood-red markings are caused by natural oxidization or mineral deposits in the marble itself. The theory suggests that imperfections within the stone cause a chemical reaction when exposed to certain environmental conditions, leading to the appearance of red discoloration. However, this explanation fails to satisfy those who argue that the stains are too localized and specific to be the result of a natural process. The fact that they appeared shortly after Nina's death and continue to resist cleaning efforts has left many unconvinced that this is a simple case of weathered stone. Other, more superstitious theories suggest that the stains are a supernatural sign of Nina's restless spirit, or even a curse placed upon the Cragmiles family. Those who believe in the paranormal argue that the mysterious marks are connected to Nina's untimely death and serve as a constant reminder of her tragic fate. Some local legends claim that Nina's spirit still haunts the crypt, with the blood-red stains acting as an indication of her continued presence. This theory is bolstered by numerous reports of ghostly sightings near the mausoleum, with visitors claiming to see the figure of a young girl or hear the faint sound of laughter coming from within the crypt's walls. There are also those who believe the Cragmiles family's wealth and influence were somehow bestowed by dark forces, leading to a curse being placed upon them. In this theory, the blood-red stains are seen as the physical manifestation of the curse, marking the mausoleum as a place of doom for those interred within. Though this theory is far-fetched, it is not unusual for legends surrounding prominent, wealthy families to be tinged with tales of curses or the supernatural, and in the case of the Cragmiles family, it is only bolstered by the mystery of the mausoleum. Even modern scientific approaches have been unable to conclusively explain the phenomenon. Geologists and stone experts have examined the mausoleum over the years, and while some point to the natural properties of the marble as a potential explanation, no definitive conclusion has been reached. This ambiguity has allowed the legend of Nina Cragmiles and her blood-stained crypt to endure, with many visitors to the site remaining convinced that the stains are something more than a mere natural occurrence. Number 11. The death of Joyce Carol Vincent. Joyce Carol Vincent was born in 1965, a vivacious and attractive young woman with many friends and a promising life ahead of her. She had a job in the corporate world, working for companies like OCL and Ernst & Young, and she rubbed shoulders with influential people. Throughout her life, Joyce maintained an air of mystery, often drifting between social circles, charming those she met with her easygoing personality and bright smile. She seemed like someone who had it all together, yet under the surface, her life was unraveling. By the mid-2000s, Joyce had severed ties with her family and many of her friends. Little is known about the exact reasons behind these decisions, but it is believed that she was a victim of domestic violence and struggled with depression. By 2003, her life had spiraled into further isolation. She left her job and began moving between shelters for victims of abuse. Eventually, she secured a small bedsit in the Wood Green area of North London, where she lived alone. It was there, in her one-bedroom apartment, that Joyce died. The circumstances surrounding Joyce's death are not entirely clear. What is known is that sometime in December 2003, Joyce passed away in her apartment. The cause of death was likely due to complications from asthma, a condition she had suffered for years, although there is some speculation that it could have been a heart attack or other sudden medical issue. Her death, however, was unnoticed for a staggering 2 years. What makes Joyce's story truly heartbreaking is that despite living in one of the most densely populated cities in the world, her body lay undiscovered in her apartment for over 2 years. During this time, her television remained on and her mail piled up at the front door. The rent for her apartment continued to be paid through housing benefits and direct deposit, and her neighbors assumed that the strange smell emanating from the apartment was due to garbage or some other issue. No one thought to check on Joyce. It wasn't until January 2006, when the Housing Association sent bailiffs to collect overdue rent after her benefits had stopped, that her body was discovered. The bailiffs forced entry into the apartment, only to be greeted by an almost surreal scene. Joyce's skeletal remains were found lying on her sofa, surrounded by Christmas presents she had been wrapping, with the TV still flickering in the background. The television, still on, had been playing for more than 2 years, a ghostly echo of her final moments. The discovery of Joyce Carol Vincent's body sparked widespread media attention and deep soul-searching about how someone could simply vanish from society without anyone noticing. How could no one have checked on her for such a long period? How could a person die in one of the busiest cities on Earth and yet be utterly alone? These are the haunting questions that linger over her story. There are many theories as to how Joyce's life unraveled to this point of extreme isolation. One theory is that her choice to cut ties with her family and friends was a defense mechanism after enduring years of abuse and trauma. It's believed that she may have retreated from those around her in an effort to protect herself, yet this decision ultimately led to her complete isolation. Another theory suggests that Joyce's charm and beauty masked her inner turmoil, leading people to assume she was doing well, when in reality, she was suffering in silence. The very traits that once made her the life of the party may have also been the reasons why no one questioned her sudden absence. In 2011, filmmaker Carol Morley released a documentary titled Dreams of a Life, which sought to uncover more about who Joyce Carol Vincent was and how her life took such a tragic turn. Through interviews with former friends, colleagues, and acquaintances, Morley painted a portrait of a woman who was well-liked, yet deeply mysterious. Many of those interviewed expressed shock and disbelief that Joyce had died in such a manner, with some admitting that they hadn't realized how much time had passed since they last saw her. One of the central mysteries surrounding Joyce's death is how she could have gone unnoticed for so long. Neighbors later said that they hadn't seen her for months, but they assumed she had moved out. Her apartment, located above a busy shopping area, seemed to have been forgotten by everyone: landlords, social services, and even the postal service. The fact that her rent was being paid automatically through housing benefits also contributed to the delay in her discovery. It wasn't until the housing benefits stopped that any attention was drawn to the flat. Despite the media attention and Morley's documentary, many questions about Joyce's life remain unanswered. Why did she cut ties with everyone she knew? What were her final moments like? And how can someone simply disappear in a world so connected? Some have speculated that Joyce's death is emblematic of a deeper societal issue: the growing alienation and disconnection that can occur in urban environments. In large cities, it is possible for people to live side by side without ever truly knowing one another, and Joyce's tragic story serves as a chilling reminder of this. It also raises important questions about how society cares for its most vulnerable members, particularly those who, like Joyce, are suffering in silence. Number 10. The disappearance of Benjamin Bathurst. Born in 1784, Benjamin Bathurst came from a distinguished family. His father was the Bishop of Norwich, and Bathurst's connections made him well suited for a diplomatic career. By 1809, the 25-year-old Bathurst had secured an important diplomatic post as an envoy, assigned to represent the British government in Austria during a critical time in the Napoleonic Wars. His mission was to negotiate with the Austrian government and seek support in the ongoing conflict with Napoleon's France. Following the Treaty of Schönbrunn in October 1809, Austria was defeated by Napoleon's forces, which meant Bathurst had to return to Britain. He embarked on a perilous journey, as the political climate in Europe was hostile to British diplomats, especially in regions occupied or influenced by France. For safety, Bathurst disguised himself and traveled under the assumed name of Baron de Kock. Along with him was his servant, who accompanied him on this fateful trip. On November 25, 1809, Bathurst and his servant arrived in the town of Perleberg, a small town in Prussia. Bathurst was traveling through hostile territory, and though Prussia was technically neutral, the risk of being captured by French agents or their allies was real. Given his precarious position, Bathurst took precautions. He ordered new horses to be prepared for the next leg of his journey, and after spending some time at a local inn, went to inspect the horses outside. This simple act of checking his horses would become the last thing Bathurst was ever known to do. Witnesses, including his servant and the innkeeper, later stated that Bathurst walked around the horses and appeared to be headed toward the carriage, but then, suddenly, he disappeared. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. His servant and other local townspeople searched the immediate area, but found no sign of him. There were no footprints, signs of a struggle, or any other evidence that could explain his sudden disappearance. Thus, one of Europe's most bewildering cases began. Initially, there were concerns that Bathurst might have been kidnapped or assassinated, either by French spies or others who might have had a motive to harm him. Napoleon was, after all, an enemy of the British, and Bathurst's role as a British diplomat made him a potential target. The possibility of foul play seemed plausible, and some speculated that he had been captured and killed, perhaps with his body hidden or disposed of in some secretive manner. In the days following Bathurst's disappearance, local authorities conducted an extensive search. His coat was found abandoned several days later, but there was no trace of his body or belongings. The search was broadened to include nearby towns and countryside, but no additional evidence came to light. British authorities were alerted, and Bathurst's family pushed for answers, but the investigation quickly stalled. No ransom note or communication from potential kidnappers was ever received, which deepened the mystery. Over the years, numerous theories have emerged to explain Benjamin Bathurst's fate. One popular theory is that he was indeed abducted by French agents, either on Napoleon's direct orders or by other figures in the French government, who saw his disappearance as a strategic move. French involvement in his disappearance would have been highly plausible, given the strained political environment at the time. However, no evidence linking Bathurst's disappearance to the French was ever discovered, and Napoleon himself reportedly denied any involvement in the matter. Another theory suggests that Bathurst may have met with an accident or been the victim of random violence or robbery. The idea that he may have been ambushed by local bandits or opportunistic criminals who saw his wealth and diplomatic status as an opportunity is a theory that has persisted. The discovery of his coat in a seemingly random location supports the plausibility of a robbery gone wrong. However, with no sign of a body or any further clues, this explanation leaves much to be desired. A more fantastical theory suggests that Bathurst's disappearance was the result of a spontaneous or voluntary vanishing act. Some have speculated that Bathurst, fearing for his life, or feeling the pressure of his political mission, may have staged his own disappearance to start a new life elsewhere. This idea is further fueled by Bathurst's use of the alias Baron de Kock, which could suggest he was already practicing a form of disguise. However, given Bathurst's established connections and standing within the British government, it seems unlikely that he would have abandoned his life so abruptly without leaving a trace or attempting to contact his family or government later on. The mystery surrounding Bathurst's fate has even inspired more imaginative theories. In modern times, some have entertained the notion that his disappearance was the result of something supernatural or extraordinary, such as time travel or dimensional shifts. While such ideas are highly speculative and based more on fiction than fact, they illustrate the profound sense of bewilderment that continues to surround this case. Over the years, searches for Bathurst's remains have continued sporadically. In 1852, a skeleton was discovered near Pearlberg, initially thought to be Bathurst's remains. However, after further forensic investigation, it was determined that the bones did not belong to him. Despite occasional claims of new evidence, the mystery of what truly happened to Benjamin Bathurst remains unsolved. Number 9. The vanishing of William and Margaret Patterson. William and Margaret Patterson owned and operated Patterson Photo Supply, a successful business in El Paso, Texas. William, also known as Bill, was 52 at the time of his disappearance, and Margaret was 48. The couple appeared to live a comfortable and stable life, well liked by friends and business associates. By all accounts, they were leading an unremarkable existence until they vanished. On March 5, 1957, the Pattersons failed to show up for a dinner engagement with friends. This was the first sign that something was wrong. The couple had not mentioned any plans to leave town, and their sudden absence was out of character. Friends tried contacting them, but received no response. Growing concerned, a close friend, Cecil Wardlaw, visited their home at 3000 Piedmont Drive. What he found only deepened the mystery. The Patterson home was in an unusual state. The couple's cars were parked outside, but the house itself appeared deserted. Inside, nothing seemed amiss, except for the fact that William's wallet and Margaret's purse were left behind, with their belongings undisturbed. Even more strangely, the Pattersons' cat was inside the home, but it had not been fed in some time, a clear indication that the couple had not intended to leave for an extended period. Wardlaw also discovered that their boat, which they frequently used, was left untouched in its garage. These signs were inconsistent with a planned trip or departure. On March 15, 1957, 10 days after their disappearance, a peculiar letter surfaced, addressed to Patterson Photo Supply, instructing the business to transfer control of the company to trusted employee Harry Spence. The letter, signed by William Patterson, indicated that he and Margaret had suddenly decided to leave town. However, this raised even more questions. The tone and style of the letter seemed off, and no one had received prior notice from the couple about any travel plans. Some began to suspect foul play. As investigators began to dig deeper into the case, they discovered several unusual aspects of the Pattersons' lives. The couple was described as reclusive, rarely socializing with their neighbors. Rumors swirled that they had connections to secretive business dealings or unsavory characters. Some even speculated that the Pattersons were involved in espionage during the height of the Cold War tensions. However, no concrete evidence was found to support these claims. Adding to the mystery were reports of sightings of the couple after their disappearance. Several witnesses claimed to have seen William Patterson driving his car in El Paso after March 5th, but these accounts were never verified. There were also rumors that the Pattersons had been spotted in Mexico, fueling speculation that they had fled the country. Despite these claims, the couple's financial records showed no activity that would suggest they had made any significant withdrawals or preparations for a sudden escape. The El Paso County Sheriff's Office launched an extensive investigation, combing through the couple's financial records, interviewing friends, family, and associates, and searching the surrounding areas. But despite their efforts, no trace of William or Margaret was ever found. Their disappearance had turned into a cold case. One of the most prominent theories is that the Pattersons were murdered, likely in connection with a business dispute or a personal vendetta. William Patterson was known as a shrewd businessman, and it's possible that someone he crossed in his business dealings may have sought revenge. Some have speculated that Patterson's involvement in the local business scene, particularly his ownership of a successful photography supply company, may have led to resentment or financial competition. There were rumors that Patterson had connections to people with shady dealings, which might have led to his and his wife's murder. However, the complete lack of evidence at their home, no signs of struggle, no forced entry, and no clear motive makes this theory difficult to prove. Moreover, no bodies were ever found, which adds another layer of complexity to this hypothesis. While this theory remains plausible, the absence of physical evidence or eyewitness testimony leaves it in the realm of speculation. A second theory revolves around the possibility that the Pattersons were kidnapped. Given El Paso's proximity to the Mexican border, some have speculated that the couple might have been abducted and taken to Mexico. Kidnappings for ransom were not unheard of in border towns during that time period, and this theory posits that the Pattersons were targeted for their wealth. However, there was never a ransom demand, and investigators found no indication that the Pattersons had enemies who would have carried out such an abduction. Additionally, there were no reports of suspicious activity before the abduction or signs of forced entry into the Pattersons' home, which makes a kidnapping seem less likely. Another theory that has gained traction over the years is that William and Margaret Patterson disappeared voluntarily, staging their own vanishing act in order to start a new life. This theory suggests that the couple, possibly weary of their routine life, decided to leave everything behind and escape to a faraway place, perhaps even to Mexico. There were some reports of sightings of the couple in Mexico following their disappearance, though none of these claims were ever substantiated. The idea of a self-imposed disappearance is supported by the fact that the Pattersons had no children and few close family ties, making it easier for them to vanish without drawing too much attention. However, this theory is also problematic. The Pattersons left behind their personal belongings, including their cat, which they were reportedly very attached to, as well as a flourishing business. If they had planned to start over, it seems unlikely they would have left so many loose ends behind. A particularly strange and less grounded theory is the possibility that the Pattersons were involved in espionage. This idea stems from the mysterious and sudden nature of their disappearance and the lack of evidence suggesting foul play or a typical criminal motive. The Cold War was at its height during the 1950s, and the border regions near Mexico were not immune to espionage activities. Some believe the Pattersons may have been caught up in secret government work, or even involved in intelligence activities. This theory posits that they either disappeared under government orders, perhaps entering witness protection, or were eliminated by foreign agents. The mysterious letter left behind, purportedly from William, which instructed that their business be handed over to an employee, adds a layer of intrigue to this theory. However, as tantalizing as this theory is, there is no direct evidence that the Pattersons were involved in any government or espionage work, making it more of a speculative hypothesis than a concrete lead. Adding to the intrigue is the theory that a crime of passion might have been involved. Some investigators initially believed that a jealous lover or someone close to the couple could have murdered them in a fit of rage. William Patterson had a reputation for being somewhat aloof, and rumors swirled about possible affairs or conflicts that could have escalated into violence. There was speculation that Margaret may have had an affair, or that someone in their social circle could have harbored resentment. However, no substantial evidence ever emerged to support this theory, and it remains an unproven idea. One of the most bizarre theories involves the possibility of witness intimidation or cover-up. Some have suggested that certain individuals close to the Pattersons knew more about their disappearance than they let on. The fact that the couple's close friend and employee, Harry Spence, quickly took over the management of their business raised eyebrows. Additionally, it was Spence who received the strange letter from William Patterson instructing him to take control. Critics of this theory argue that there was no motive for Spence to have been involved in their disappearance, but others believe that this was an inside job, possibly involving more than one party. Still, the lack of concrete evidence connecting Spence or anyone else to foul play makes this theory speculative. In the decades since the Pattersons vanished, their case has been revisited periodically, but no new leads have surfaced. In 1984, a court officially declared the couple deceased, though no bodies were ever found. Number 8. The Erdington Murders. The Erdington Murders refer to two eerily similar and still unsolved cases that took place in the Erdington area of Birmingham, England, separated by a gap of exactly 157 years. The strange coincidences and similarities between the two cases have left many intrigued, with speculation ranging from pure chance to something more sinister and mysterious. The victims, Mary Ashford and Barbara Forrest, shared numerous similarities in their cases, including the dates, locations, and even the circumstances of their deaths, giving rise to numerous theories surrounding these chilling events. On May 27, 1817, the body of 20-year-old Mary Ashford was found in a pit near Penn's Lane in Erdington. Ashford had spent the evening before her death at a dance with a man named Abraham Thornton. After the dance, the two left together, and Ashford was never seen alive again. Thornton was later arrested and charged with her murder after blood-stained clothes and signs of a struggle were discovered. However, despite the damning evidence, Thornton was acquitted of the crime. A second attempt to try him under an ancient English law called trial by battle also failed, allowing Thornton to walk free. To this day, the true identity of Mary Ashford's killer remains unknown, leaving her murder a cold case. Exactly 157 years later, on May 27, 1974, Barbara Forrest, a 20-year-old nurse, was found murdered in Erdington, just a mile from the spot where Mary Ashford's body was discovered. Like Ashford, Forrest had been out with a man the night before her murder. She too was last seen alive after attending the night out, and her body was discovered in a secluded area, showing signs of attack. Police quickly arrested a suspect, a man named Michael Thornton, no relation to Abraham Thornton. However, despite circumstantial evidence linking Thornton to the crime, including his presence near the scene of the murder, he was eventually acquitted due to insufficient evidence. Barbara Forrest's murder also remains officially unsolved. The parallels between the two murders are striking, leading many to believe that the Erdington murders are more than just a coincidence. Both women were 20 years old at the time of their deaths. Both were last seen alive on the same date, May 27th, exactly 157 years apart, and both were found in eerily similar circumstances, near the same location in Erdington. In both cases, the prime suspect was acquitted, leaving the identity of the murderer unknown. These coincidences have sparked numerous theories, with some suggesting that the cases may be connected through some kind of supernatural or karmic force, while others believe that it is a case of history repeating itself in a disturbingly similar manner. One popular theory surrounding the Erdington murders involves the idea of fate or destiny. Some believe that the two murders were part of a larger cosmic pattern, with the lives of Mary Ashford and Barbara Forrest being intertwined in some way. The strange parallels between the cases, such as the identical ages of the victims, the dates of their deaths, and the locations where they were found, have led some to speculate that the two women were connected through a shared fate, doomed to suffer the same tragic end. This theory is often dismissed as purely speculative, but it has captivated the imaginations of those who believe that the Erdington murders were more than just a coincidence. Another theory that has been proposed is that the two murders were the work of a copycat killer. Some have suggested that the murderer of Barbara Forrest may have been inspired by the unsolved case of Mary Ashford, deliberately recreating the circumstances of her death in an attempt to evade capture. The fact that both suspects in the cases were acquitted, despite compelling evidence, has led to speculation that the murderer may have been someone with knowledge of the original case, using it as a blueprint for their crime. This theory, while intriguing, has never been proven, and there is no direct evidence linking the two cases beyond the strange coincidences. Despite numerous investigations, the Erdington murders remain unsolved to this day, and the mysterious similarities between the two cases continue to baffle both investigators and the public. Some believe that the cases are a reminder of the randomness and cruelty of fate, while others think that there may be a more logical explanation waiting to be uncovered. Whether the murders of Mary Ashford and Barbara Forrest were the result of a cosmic twist of fate, a copycat killer, or simply an extraordinary coincidence, the Erdington murders have left a lasting legacy of mystery and speculation. In more recent years, true crime enthusiasts and amateur sleuths have taken an interest in the cases, attempting to piece together the evidence and unravel the mystery behind both of the Erdington murders. However, with the cases over a century apart and little new evidence to go on, the mystery remains as elusive as ever. The Erdington murders, with their eerie parallels and strange coincidences, continue to captivate the public's imagination, and the story of Mary Ashford and Barbara Forrest remains among the most perplexing unsolved mysteries in British history. Number 7. Przybylski's Star. Przybylski's Star, officially known as HD 101065, is one of the most peculiar astronomical objects ever discovered, baffling scientists for decades since it was first identified by Polish-Australian astronomer Antoni Przybylski in 1961. Its unique chemical composition and odd characteristics have led some to speculate that it might even be a sign of extraterrestrial life or advanced alien civilizations. However, while these theories have ignited imaginations, the star itself remains shrouded in mystery, with a range of possible scientific explanations that continue to perplex researchers. Przybylski discovered the star while conducting stellar spectral surveys. Immediately, he noticed that its light spectrum was unlike any other star that had been observed. Its spectrum was marked by the presence of unusually high amounts of heavy elements like strontium, uranium, neodymium, and thorium, as well as other rare earth elements typically not found in such concentrations in stars. These elements are so rare that many of them are usually only found on Earth as byproducts of nuclear reactions. This led to the immediate conclusion that Przybylski's star was not just a typical chemically peculiar star, but something far stranger. Initially, it was classified as an AP star, a type of chemically peculiar star that has strong magnetic fields and abnormal concentrations of certain metals in its atmosphere. However, as more data emerged, astronomers began to realize that Przybylski's star was an extreme outlier even within this category. Some of the elements detected in its spectrum were so unusual that they hinted at either a very rapid, ongoing nucleosynthesis within the star, or, as more speculative thinkers suggested, something entirely unprecedented in stellar evolution. One of the main mysteries surrounding Cybulski's star is the presence of certain elements that have extremely short half-lives, meaning they should decay very quickly into more stable isotopes. Elements such as promethium, which have no stable isotopes and decay relatively fast, were found in the star's atmosphere. The natural question is, how are these elements replenished? Under normal circumstances, they should decay away faster than they could be created by known stellar processes, which adds a layer of complexity to the puzzle. Some astronomers have proposed that the star could be accreting material from an interstellar medium rich in these elements, or that unusual magnetic field dynamics might be concentrating these elements near the star's surface. Yet none of these explanations has fully accounted for the abundance of short-lived radioactive elements found there. Given these perplexing chemical properties, theories about Cybulski's star have extended beyond conventional astrophysical explanations. One of the more outlandish but tantalizing theories suggests that the star might be a prime candidate for hosting or being the work of an advanced alien civilization. Some have speculated that the peculiar elements could be the byproduct of extraterrestrial megastructures or technology, similar to Dyson spheres, designed to harness energy from stars. Such technology could potentially involve nuclear reactions or particle accelerators that create unusual isotopes. However, this remains purely speculative and without concrete evidence, though it has piqued the interest of researchers involved in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Despite these more imaginative theories, most astrophysicists believe that the explanation for Cybulski's star lies in the complexities of stellar nucleosynthesis and magnetic field dynamics. One proposed hypothesis is that the star may have undergone a rare evolutionary path, with its internal structure or magnetic fields allowing for the unusual accumulation of heavy elements on its surface. Another theory is that the star is in the process of creating new elements through mechanisms we do not yet fully understand. In recent years, further advances in spectrograph technology have allowed astronomers to study Cybulski's star in even more detail. However, the strange mix of elements continues to elude a definitive explanation. While the star's chemical composition remains its most defining mystery, other questions linger about its life cycle and future evolution. Researchers hope that continued observations and theoretical models may shed more light on these processes, though the star's peculiarities make it difficult to draw direct comparisons to other known stellar bodies. Cybulski's star has also drawn comparisons to other mysterious astronomical phenomena, like Tabby's star, which similarly sparked speculation about the possibility of alien megastructures when its irregular dimming patterns were first observed. Though Tabby's star was later attributed to more natural explanations, such as dust clouds, it showed that mysterious stars can often lead to surprising revelations, though not always the ones expected. One of the challenges with Cybulski's star is that while many astronomical mysteries can be solved through a combination of observational data and theoretical modeling, the star's particular quirks remain unresolved due to the strange combination of rare isotopes and elements in its atmosphere. As a result, Cybulski's star continues to be one of the most significant and unusual unsolved cases in modern astrophysics. Number 6. The murder of Julia Wallace. Julia Wallace was a housewife living with her husband, William Herbert Wallace, in their modest home at 29 Wolverton Street in the Anfield district of Liverpool. Wallace worked as an insurance agent for the Prudential Assurance Company, and by all accounts, the couple lived a relatively quiet, unassuming life. On January 19, 1931, the events of the evening began with a phone call that William Herbert Wallace received while at the Central Chess Club in Liverpool. The call was for Wallace, placed by an individual using the name R.M. Qualtrough, who asked Wallace to visit him at 25 Menlove Gardens East the next evening to discuss insurance business. Qualtrough provided specific instructions and details, requesting Wallace's presence at 7:30 p.m. Wallace found the request odd, but felt obliged to follow up, as it was part of his job to meet potential clients. However, the following day, January 20th, 1931, would end in tragedy. Wallace left his home around 6:45 p.m. and made his way to the Menlove Gardens area, following Qualtrough's directions. Upon arriving, he was unable to find the address. Menlove Gardens East did not exist, although there was a Menlove Gardens North, South, and West. Wallace spent over half an hour asking locals and inquiring at various addresses, including at a police station, before eventually giving up and returning home. When Wallace arrived back at his house around 8:45 p.m., he was greeted by a horrifying sight. The front door was locked from the inside, and after struggling to enter, he found his wife, Julia, brutally murdered in their sitting room. She had been struck multiple times with what was believed to be a blunt instrument, with her skull crushed. There were no signs of forced entry or a robbery. Panic and confusion ensued, and Wallace immediately called the police. The police investigation initially focused on William Herbert Wallace. The strange phone call from the mysterious R.M. Qualtrough seemed suspicious, especially since it had been made at the chess club the night before, where only members would have known Wallace was present. The police speculated that Wallace could have orchestrated the call himself, setting up an elaborate alibi for the murder. It was suggested that he might have killed Julia before leaving for Menlove Gardens, and then deliberately wasted time to distance himself from the crime. Wallace was eventually arrested and charged with his wife's murder. The trial of William Herbert Wallace in April 1931 became one of the most notorious court cases in British legal history. Prosecutors argued that Wallace had carefully planned the murder, using the fake phone call as a means to remove suspicion. They claimed that he had staged the supposed client meeting to establish an alibi. Wallace maintained his innocence throughout the trial, denying any involvement in the murder. Despite the prosecution's case, Wallace's defense team pointed out several inconsistencies. For one, Wallace was a frail man, suffering from chronic kidney disease, and it seemed highly unlikely that he could have physically overpowered his wife and brutally murdered her. Additionally, there was no clear motive for Wallace to kill Julia. The couple had no financial issues, and there was no evidence of marital discord. After a brief trial, Wallace was convicted of the murder and sentenced to death by hanging. However, the case did not end there. In a shocking turn of events, Wallace's conviction was overturned on appeal due to insufficient evidence. This marked the first time in British legal history that a conviction of murder had been overturned on appeal. Wallace was released from prison, but he remained under a cloud of suspicion for the rest of his life. Following Wallace's release, various theories about who killed Julia Wallace began to emerge. One of the most prominent theories pointed to a man named Richard Perry, a former employee at the Prudential Assurance Company who had been involved in petty criminal activities. Perry was known to have a grudge against Wallace, as Wallace had previously reprimanded him for his conduct. Some believed that Perry might have been the elusive Qualtrough and had orchestrated the murder in an attempt to frame Wallace. However, Perry was never charged or formally investigated, and this theory remains speculative. Another theory, advanced by modern criminologists and amateur sleuths, posits that Julia's murder was a result of a burglary gone wrong. The lack of forced entry could indicate that the killer was someone Julia knew and willingly let into the house. Some suggest that Wallace may have inadvertently interrupted the crime upon his return, forcing the burglar to flee before completing the robbery. There are also those who believe that Wallace himself was indeed guilty, but managed to outwit the police and judicial system through careful planning. Some find it difficult to believe that anyone other than Wallace could have had the knowledge and opportunity to carry out such a complex plan. They argue that Wallace's demeanor during the investigation and trial seemed too calm for someone in his situation. The mystery of Julia Wallace's murder remains unsolved to this day. William Herbert Wallace passed away in 1933, just 2 years after being acquitted, having never fully escaped the suspicion that surrounded him. The case has since become a landmark in British legal history, studied by generations of lawyers, detectives, and true crime enthusiasts. It has been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and analyses, with no definitive conclusion ever reached. Number 5. The disappearance of Mayumi Arashi. On September 2nd, 1994, Mayumi Arashi, a 27-year-old woman from Japan, left her home in Tokyo with the apparent intent to meet someone. She told her family that she was going to see a person, but didn't disclose who. This was the last time anyone ever saw her. When Mayumi failed to return home, her family became increasingly concerned, and soon after, she was reported missing to local authorities. As the investigation began, authorities found little evidence to suggest where Mayumi could have gone or whom she had intended to meet that day. Her phone records and personal belongings offered no significant clues, and no witnesses came forward to offer any helpful information about her last known movements. It was as though Mayumi had vanished into thin air, leaving nothing behind but unanswered questions. Things took a more mysterious turn when Mayumi's younger sister, Yoko Arashi, made a discovery of the name and phone number of an individual who claimed to have met with Mayumi earlier on the day she disappeared. However, there was no concrete evidence to connect this person with Mayumi's disappearance. The family, particularly Yoko, began acting in ways that only deepened the mystery. Yoko's behavior following Mayumi's disappearance raised eyebrows. Her unwillingness to cooperate fully with the investigation and her seemingly secretive demeanor led to growing speculation that she knew more about Mayumi's fate than she let on. Some even theorized that Yoko could have been involved in Mayumi's disappearance, but no evidence has ever supported this claim. Years passed, and despite the family's efforts to keep Mayumi's case alive, there were no substantial leads or breakthroughs. However, online forums, especially Reddit, reignited public interest in the case, drawing attention to the unresolved questions. One key detail that piqued the interest of online sleuths was the timeline of events on the day of Mayumi's disappearance. The lack of clear information regarding her meeting plans made it difficult for anyone to piece together a coherent narrative of what might have happened. During a televised interview with Mayumi's father, viewers noticed a note taped up behind the man which read, "Don't believe what Yoko says." Up until this point, Yoko had been providing much of the information to investigators about Mayumi's disappearance. Now, all of that was thrown into question. Though the note was prominent during Mayumi's father's interview, it was not mentioned by him or the interviewer during the televised segment. Theories about Mayumi's disappearance have circulated for years. One theory suggests that Mayumi may have been involved in a secretive or dangerous relationship, possibly with someone tied to organized crime, and that this person orchestrated her disappearance. The lack of details regarding who she was supposed to meet that day supports this notion, as does the apparent lack of struggle or evidence suggesting foul play in her home or personal belongings. There were also those who believed that Mayumi's disappearance could have been voluntary, that she chose to disappear to escape some personal or familial conflict. The notion that she was meeting someone could support this theory, suggesting that she may have been planning to leave her life behind. If the message about Yoko is genuine, it could point to a deep family secret, one that Mayumi may have been fleeing from. The eerie circumstances surrounding Mayumi's case, especially the note about Yoko, have made it a source of fascination in Japan and internationally. In fact, as the years passed, the case became something of a legend, with people continuing to speculate about what happened to Mayumi and why Yoko might have tried to deflect suspicion. The disappearance of Mayumi Arashi remains unsolved. Despite numerous theories, there has been no closure for the Arashi family, or the public. Yoko, now an older woman, has maintained her silence, and the cryptic message about her is still one of the most perplexing pieces of the puzzle. There is no evidence to point to Yoko's involvement with anything, and no further clues about Mayumi's fate have emerged. Number 4. Frances Levy's handprint. It all began in 1924, with a seemingly ordinary day at the firehouse, where Francis Levy, a well-respected firefighter, was quietly going about his duties. According to legend, Levy was cleaning a window at the firehouse when he suddenly stopped, turned to his colleagues, and made an eerie declaration. He had a strange feeling that he was going to die that day. His fellow firefighters, though unnerved, didn't take his comment seriously, dismissing it as an odd remark. Little did they know that Levy's ominous premonition would come true later that very day. On April 18, 1924, a massive fire broke out at Curran Hall, a commercial building in Chicago. Levy and his fellow firefighters were called to the scene, and as they bravely battled the flames, tragedy struck. A section of the building collapsed, killing Levy and several other firefighters. His colleagues were devastated by the loss, but in the days following his death, something even stranger occurred. As the firefighters at Levy's station attempted to move on from the tragedy, they began to notice something inexplicable. The very window Levy had been cleaning on the day of his death now bore the distinct imprint of a hand, pressed firmly against the glass. No matter how hard they tried to wash it away, the handprint remained. The window was scrubbed, cleaned with powerful chemicals, and even replaced, yet the handprint continued to reappear. Firefighters soon became convinced that the handprint belonged to Levy, and that it was a sign of his spirit lingering in the firehouse, a reminder of his tragic death. The mysterious handprint quickly became a local legend, with many believing that Levy had left a part of himself behind in the firehouse. Word spread, and this station of the Chicago Fire Department became the focus of curiosity, with people eager to see the ghostly handprint for themselves. Reporters and paranormal enthusiasts flocked to the firehouse, eager to witness the phenomenon. For years, the handprint persisted, resisting all attempts to remove it. Eventually, the fire department gave up on trying to clean the window, choosing instead to leave it as a memorial to Levy and his fallen comrades. However, the story doesn't end there. Decades later, skeptics began to question the authenticity of the handprint and the tale surrounding it. Some suggested that the handprint could be a result of natural causes, such as the oils from Levy's skin reacting with the cleaning agents used on the window, creating a stubborn stain that couldn't be easily removed. Others speculated that the story had been exaggerated over time, with the handprint becoming more myth than reality. In fact, Chicago historian Adam Selzer investigated the handprint in detail, attempting to separate fact from fiction. He discovered that there were few, if any, contemporary records of the handprint's existence during the time of Levy's death. The tale seems to have been passed down through oral tradition, growing more elaborate with each retelling. Selzer's research suggested that the handprint might have been the product of collective memory and storytelling, rather than a genuine paranormal occurrence. Nevertheless, the mystery of Francis Levy's handprint has endured, and for many, it remains a symbol of the sacrifices made by firefighters. The handprint is often viewed as a message from beyond the grave, a haunting reminder of the dangers faced by those who put their lives on the line to save others. Some paranormal enthusiasts have speculated that Levy's handprint is a form of what's known as residual haunting, where a spirit leaves behind an imprint or memory in the physical world. In this case, Levy's premonition of his own death and the intense emotions he must have felt on the day of the fire could have been so strong that they left a permanent mark on the environment. This theory posits that the handprint isn't necessarily Levy's ghost, but rather a lingering energy that manifests in the form of a handprint on the glass. Others have pointed to similar cases of ghostly handprints or unexplained marks appearing in the aftermath of tragic events. Some believe these phenomena are proof that the human soul can leave a lasting impression on the physical world, particularly in moments of great distress or emotion. While there's no scientific evidence to support these claims, stories like Levy's continue to fascinate those who are drawn to the paranormal. Ultimately, whether the handprint was a supernatural occurrence, a chemical reaction, or simply a story that grew out of control, it remains one of Chicago's biggest mysteries. Number 3. The disappearance of Ambrose Bierce. Born in 1842 in Ohio, Ambrose Bierce rose to prominence for his scathing wit, dark humor, and sharp criticism of society. His most famous works include The Devil's Dictionary and the short story An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, the latter being widely regarded as one of the finest pieces of American literature. He was a man of complex character, shaped by the horrors of the Civil War, in which he served as a Union soldier. Throughout his life, Bierce was known for his cynical worldview and biting commentary on human nature, which earned him the nickname Bitter Bierce. In the autumn of 1913, at the age of 71, Bierce embarked on what he described as a last grand tour. He left Washington, D.C., and traveled to the southern United States, visiting Civil War battlefields he had fought on decades earlier. By December, Bierce had crossed into Mexico, which was at the time in the midst of the Revolution. He had long expressed admiration for the revolutionary movement, particularly for Pancho Villa, the charismatic Mexican general. Bierce wrote letters to friends back home, noting his plans to observe Villa's army and perhaps even join the revolutionary forces. His final known letter, dated December 26, 1913, was sent from Chihuahua, Mexico, where Villa's headquarters were located. After that, Bierce vanished without a trace. Theories surrounding Bierce's disappearance are abundant, each more intriguing than the last. One of the most widely accepted theories is that Bierce died in Mexico, either killed by revolutionaries or succumbing to illness or old age. The Mexican Revolution was a chaotic period, and it is entirely possible that Bierce, a foreigner and an elderly man, met an unfortunate end in the midst of the turmoil. Some speculate that he was executed by one of Villa's rival factions, while others suggest that Bierce might have died in battle while fighting alongside Villa's forces. However, no definitive evidence has ever been found to confirm his death in Mexico, and his body was never recovered. Another popular theory suggests that Bierce, ever the cynic and lover of dark irony, deliberately staged his own disappearance. Some historians believe that Bierce, who had written extensively about death and the absurdity of life, might have orchestrated his own vanishing act as a final commentary on the futility of existence. Given his advanced age and declining health, it's possible that Bierce saw the Mexican Revolution as a fitting backdrop for his last great adventure, one that would allow him to disappear into legend. This theory is supported by the fact that Bierce left behind no clear plans or itinerary, making it difficult for anyone to track his movements. Another theory argues that Bierce may have never made it to Mexico at all. Some researchers argue that Bierce, who was in poor health during his travels, might have died somewhere in the southern United States, perhaps succumbing to a heart attack or stroke. According to this theory, his disappearance in Mexico was simply a cover story, concocted to add a layer of mystique to his death. This would explain the lack of concrete evidence placing Bierce in Mexico after his final letter. Adding to the intrigue are reports from locals in Mexico who claim to have seen Bierce after his disappearance. Some witnesses insisted they had encountered an American man matching Bierce's description in various parts of the country. However, these accounts were often vague and unsubstantiated, making it difficult to separate fact from fiction. One particularly famous report came from a man named George T. Marsh, who claimed to have met Bierce in Mexico City in early 1914. Marsh described the writer as being in good spirits and planning to head further south. However, this account has never been verified, and it remains unclear whether Marsh's Bierce was the real Ambrose Bierce or merely a fabrication or an imposter. A more outlandish theory suggests that Bierce may have fallen victim to paranormal forces. Given Bierce's fascination with the supernatural and his writing on mysterious and eerie phenomena, some have speculated that his disappearance was not a natural one. The theories range from alien abduction to time travel, though these remain firmly in the realm of fiction. Still, the lack of any concrete evidence has allowed these ideas to persist, adding another layer of mystery to Bierce's vanishing. One of the more recent theories revolves around a man known as El Mistico, a mysterious figure who appeared in Mexican folklore around the same time as Bierce's disappearance. Some researchers have drawn parallels between El Mistico and Bierce, suggesting that Bierce may have assumed a new identity and lived out his final days as a wandering mystic in Mexico. While there is little evidence to support this theory, it remains an intriguing possibility, particularly given Bierce's big personality and love of dramatic gestures. Despite extensive searches and investigations over the years, the mystery of Ambrose Bierce's disappearance has never been solved. Historians, journalists, and enthusiasts have all tried to piece together the final days of the writer's life, but the truth remains elusive. Bierce's disappearance has become one of the most famous unsolved cases in literary history, cementing his legacy as a man who lived and died on his own terms. In the end, Ambrose Bierce's vanishing is a fitting conclusion to his life. A man who wrote extensively about death and the unknown, Bierce's disappearance leaves us with the same unanswered questions that he so often explored in his work. Whether he died in battle, succumbed to illness, or staged his own exit, the mystery of Ambrose Bierce will likely never be fully resolved, allowing his legend to endure. Number 2. The Vanishing of David Lang. On September 23, 1880, David Lang was allegedly walking in front of his farmhouse when he vanished without a trace. His wife, children, and a local judge, Augustus Peck, who had come to visit the Lang family, were all present and reportedly witnessed his sudden disappearance. According to the story, Lang had been walking toward his horses when he suddenly ceased to exist, leaving his family and the judge in shock. They ran to the spot where they had last seen him, but there was no sign of him, no footprints, no disturbance in the soil, just an eerie silence. The story goes on to claim that for months after David Lang's disappearance, the grass where he was last seen refused to grow. In fact, a large circular patch of dead grass marked the area where he had vanished. His family and friends continued to search the area, even consulting local authorities, but no trace of Lang was ever found. Adding to the strangeness, David Lang's children allegedly reported hearing their father's voice calling out faintly from the field months after his disappearance. They claimed that they heard him calling for help, but despite thorough searches of the area, no one could locate the source of the voice. Over time, the voice grew weaker until it disappeared completely, leaving the family in despair. The tale of David Lang's vanishing first gained widespread attention after it was published in a number of American magazines and newspapers. One of the earliest references to the event appeared in an 1884 issue of the St. Louis Times, and later it was featured in other publications such as Fate magazine, which specialized in unexplained phenomena and paranormal stories. The story also became popular in folklore collections, contributing to its wide circulation and continued retelling. However, skepticism about the story of David Lang's disappearance arose almost as soon as the tale began to spread. There is no historical record of a person named David Lang vanishing in Tennessee at that time, nor are there any contemporary news reports of such an event occurring in the region. Researchers and skeptics have been unable to find any official documentation or credible witnesses that would substantiate the story. It is often suggested that the entire story was fabricated, or at least greatly exaggerated over time. One possible origin of the story may lie in the work of American author and journalist Ambrose Bierce, whose own disappearance was a previous entry on this list. Bierce, who had a penchant for writing eerie and mysterious stories, published a short story called The Difficulty of Crossing a Field just a few years after David Lang's disappearance was first reported. In this story, a man vanishes while walking across a field, much like the tale of David Lang. Some researchers believe that the story of David Lang's vanishing may have been inspired by Bierce's work, or was simply an urban legend that grew into a popular piece of American folklore. Other theories suggest that the story could be a variation of older folktales about mysterious disappearances. Stories about people vanishing into thin air or being swallowed by the earth are common in many cultures, often associated with supernatural explanations, such as being taken by spirits, otherworldly beings, or even aliens. The patch of dead grass in the David Lang story adds to the sense of the supernatural, evoking imagery of cursed land or otherworldly forces at play. Despite the lack of historical evidence, the story of David Lang has persisted for well over a century, and it continues to be a subject of public fascination. The tale has been retold in various forms, including radio plays, documentaries, and even books on paranormal phenomena. One version of the story claims that the location where Lang disappeared became a cursed spot, with strange occurrences happening to anyone who ventured near the area. Although no conclusive evidence supports these claims, such embellishments have helped to keep the legend alive. Another theory is that the story was a cautionary tale or a metaphor for the uncertainty and dangers of rural life in the 19th century. With limited communication, poor medical knowledge, and hazardous living conditions, it was not uncommon for people to disappear without a trace due to accidents, illness, or other misfortunes. The story of David Lang may have reflected those anxieties, turning a common fear into a fantastical narrative. Over time, the story of David Lang has become an iconic example of unexplained disappearances in American folklore. Though widely considered a hoax or urban legend, it continues to captivate the imagination of those who enjoy tales of the strange and unexplainable. Number 1. The Mysterious Seti. Born in London in 1904, Dorothy Louise Eady's life took a dramatic and unusual turn after a childhood accident, when she fell down a flight of stairs at the age of 3. Declared dead by doctors, she miraculously survived, but her behavior and memories changed drastically after the incident, leading her to believe that she had lived a previous life in ancient Egypt. From a young age, Dorothy exhibited an obsession with Egypt, claiming that she did not belong in her time or place. She began identifying strongly with the culture and history of ancient Egypt, much to the bewilderment of her parents. By the time she was a teenager, Dorothy's strange behavior and vivid memories of Egypt had led her to assert that she was the reincarnation of a priestess named Bentreshit, who had lived during the reign of Pharaoh Seti I over 3,000 years ago. She claimed to have been a priestess at the temple of Seti I in Abydos, and even described her former life in extraordinary detail. As Dorothy grew older, her fascination with Egypt only deepened. In 1933, She moved to Egypt, where she married an Egyptian man, Imam Abdel Meguid, and gave birth to a son whom she named Seti, a clear reference to her former life. She became known as Seti, meaning Mother of Seti in Arabic. Though her marriage did not last, her connection to Egypt and her past life remained unshakable. Seti believed that she had been in love with Pharaoh Seti I during her previous life, and her memories of him were vivid and full of emotion. She claimed that she had taken her own life in that past life to avoid punishment after breaking her vow of celibacy as a priestess. These revelations about her supposed past life stunned Egyptologists and skeptics alike, but Seti's knowledge of ancient Egypt was so profound that even her harshest critics found it difficult to dismiss her claims entirely. What makes Seti's story particularly mysterious is the accuracy of her knowledge regarding ancient Egyptian sites, especially the Temple of Seti I in Abydos, where she spent much of her later life. Her detailed knowledge of the temple, including obscure and undiscovered chambers and inscriptions, left Egyptologists astonished. Seti had an uncanny ability to describe locations and details that had yet to be uncovered by archaeological teams. For example, she led archaeologists to the sites of previously unknown gardens and ancient wells that were only later confirmed through excavation. Seti's devotion to Seti I and the temple was so profound that she spent decades working at the site, dedicating her life to its preservation and study. Despite her unconventional beliefs, she gained the respect of renowned Egyptologists, many of whom admired her dedication and expertise. Her knowledge of hieroglyphics, religious rituals, and Egyptian history was unparalleled, and she became an important figure in the study of ancient Egypt. Even though her claims of reincarnation were met with skepticism, theories surrounding Seti's extraordinary knowledge of ancient Egypt vary widely. Skeptics argue that her claims of reincarnation were a result of her intense passion and obsession with Egyptian history, suggesting that her vast knowledge came from years of study rather than past life memories. Some have speculated that she may have experienced a psychological condition known as cryptomnesia, in which forgotten memories resurface in a way that makes the individual believe they are new or supernatural in origin. Others, however, remain open to the possibility that Seti's memories were indeed the result of reincarnation. The accuracy of her descriptions, especially in cases where she revealed details that were later confirmed by archaeological discoveries, has led some to believe that she possessed knowledge that could not have been acquired through conventional means. One of the most compelling examples of Seti's inexplicable knowledge occurred during a visit to the Temple of Seti I in Abydos. While exploring the temple, she pointed to a specific wall and claimed that there had once been a garden in that location. Archaeologists were skeptical, but when they began to dig, they discovered evidence of an ancient garden that matched her description exactly. This was one of the many instances in which Seti demonstrated knowledge of ancient Egypt that seemed impossible to explain. Seti's belief in reincarnation and her connection to Pharaoh Seti I have inspired countless debates within both academic and spiritual communities. While some remain skeptical of her claims, others view her life as evidence of the possibility of past lives and the continuation of the soul beyond death. Regardless of one's beliefs, Seti's story remains one of the most intriguing and mysterious cases in modern history. Until her death in 1981, Seti continued to live near the Temple of Seti I, where she felt most at home. She was buried in a simple grave near Abydos, where life's journey, both past and present, had taken her. Her story lives on, a testament to the mysteries of the human mind and the possibilities of life beyond death. Whether her knowledge was the result of scholarly dedication, vivid imagination, or true reincarnation, Seti remains one of the most fascinating figures in the world of Egyptology and paranormal history.